discuss how to read an evolutionary tree. Sometimes you'll hear the term cladogram or phylogenetic tree um, or evolutionary tree, but they're all going to be similar. And what it does is organize data and information about um, the ancestors of organisms into a way that we can understand the relationships between them and where common ancestry may be found. So in this example here, we see that we would have a common ancestor down at the very bottom for all of these taxon. And what happens is they might branch off, and we know that organisms start to evolve and adapt. They change. Well, if we see, someplace that branches off or diverges, then it change into these different organisms. So where the where this organism started, it then diverged and became two different organisms here. And then we have another taxon that happened over here, C, which has not changed. And this common ancestor for A and B here diverged, so that, A and B, they're sister groups, they came from the same ancestor, but all three of the taxon have a common ancestor down here. If we continue looking at some of these, each of these rectangles here, the colors, they're actually showing you a different clade. And a clade is a group of organisms that includes all ancestors, includes an ancestor and all the descendants of that ancestor. So these clades then have something in common, and then they can branch off and become more specific. So they all have this common ancestor at the bottom, but you're going to have all of these organisms located in the red is going to be one clade, and they're going to be descendants of the same ancestor. Same thing with the yellow one, and then the blue one will be descendants of this ancestor here. Okay, and it can keep branching off to become smaller and smaller. And then we can look at something like this. All life on Earth is related. Okay, so we can actually make a single tree out of it. We can look at archaea, and then it branches off into bacteria or prokaryotes and eukaryotes. And then you can see that there's tons of branches off these single branches because they become more specialized and diverge into lots of different organisms. So that's another way of representing it. And then we can look at this. Here's a common ancestor on the bottom. Then you can see turtles, lizards, snakes, birds, okay? And it goes all the way through. Well, remember that these forks here, that represents a clade. So the lizards and snakes are going to be more closely related than lizards and turtles, okay? Because turtles are on their own branch over here. They have a common ancestor, but not as common as the lizards and snakes. But lizards and snakes do have the same ancestor as crocodiles. And all of these branches are going to represent different characteristics. So the closer the branches are, the more characteristics they're going to have in common. And the further apart they are, the less characteristics they're going to have in common. And you can see the relationships as you follow each of these branches as they get smaller and smaller. We can also look at these to look at time periods and see when organisms, have died out or ceased to continue. We can look at the evolutionary tree of the finch. We've been talking about finches with Darwin. So here's the common ancestor, the South American, on the South American mainland. And this ancestor branched off. And it branched off into this branch here and the warbler finches. So you end up with two warbler finches. And here we had the bud eater. Well, if you notice, this doesn't branch off anymore. And if we had a time frame going up, we would see that it no longer exists because it was not able to adapt. So it didn't branch off and evolve and change. So it will no longer be in existence. And we have other organisms, though. There's tree finches, there's ground finches, and these have branched off into all of these different organisms. So you have, depending on the time frames, you're going to have different categories of organisms, and you're going to be able to see which organisms are still in existence and which play a role in the present population.